After years of dominance from the SEC, has the Big Ten risen to the top of the mountain? We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for the Big Ten Live Show. We come your way each and every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 on the West Coast. Appreciate you stopping by. Pull up and leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. We appreciate your contributions via the Super Chat. As you see on the ticker down below, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are the most effective ways to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. Just let us know that this is for the Big Ten show. Right next to me is, of course, the guy that makes it go for us on Monday nights, Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. Matt, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Mark. And it's a very, very happy New Year in the Big Ten and in the Midwest on a larger level. Could not have scripted it much better. The only thing would be if, that targeting call had been properly applied, and it would be Arizona State against Ohio State instead of Texas. But other than that, Big Ten really made out like a bandit in the quarterfinals.
So, Matt, before we take off on the particular teams and the previous games we just saw heading into this semifinal weekend, the narrative of, and this is not debatable, a lot of SEC bashers think it is, the last 15 plus years, the SEC has been the best conference by any and every measurement. It's not close. The Big Ten has, for most of that time, been the second best conference, not every year, but generally been the second best conference. Now we've arrived at a place where, and you know me, I am the last one to jump out with some kind of rash take that, okay, the SEC lost one bowl game, Missouri lost to Army, okay, the SEC demise is here. I don't do anything like that. So once the SEC lost a couple bowl games, people were piling on the SEC, and I was going, hang on, just a second. We still have, let's say, 6 or 7 bowl games left, postseason games. Plus, let's understand that while the SEC was not dominant in non-conference play, clearly, and I'm the guy that runs through all the metrics, the results, and seeds the teams and so forth, that the SEC did have the best non-conference season. So even if their bowl season is not the best, once we get through this entire season, we'll lay it out here at the Voice of College Football and run through what we believe to be the rankings. But it's going to be the most interesting breakdown that we've had here ever because of the SEC's slight demise. But even at this point, even though things look tremendously strong for the Big Ten, I want to get through this weekend because there is a possibility Texas wins the national championship, Penn State loses to Notre Dame, and you had 2 Big Ten teams stall in the semifinals and the SEC still come through. And then if that happens with what's happened throughout the rest of the bowl season and the non-conference schedule, I think the SEC would still have an argument about being, albeit a close, razor-sharp number one, razor-close number one. But it's looking very good for the Big Ten, especially with the way Ohio State's playing.
That's absolutely true. And, if people who watched this Big Ten show 2 weeks ago, just before Christmas, here at the Voice of College Football, after the first round, if you heard me discuss Ohio State, Oregon, I said, no, I have no idea who wins the game. But I did say, I wouldn't be shocked if it was a blowout either way. It turned out to be a blowout for Ohio State. And Ohio State is the most talented team in the country. That talent showed out. You saw the fully maxed out, fully realized, actualized potential of that team against Oregon. That was just a flamethrower. It was a blowtorch to a 13-0 Oregon team, which by far had the best regular season of any team, and Oregon looked like JV. This was men against boys. Pick your analogy, pick your phrasing. Ohio State's obviously the most talented team, and you put that up against Texas, playing with its food regularly, and paid the price against Georgia, let Clemson hang around far longer than it ever should have, and then up 16 with 10 minutes left against Arizona State. And frankly, if targeting is properly called, ASU has first and 10 at the Texas 38 with a minute left. Doesn't guarantee ASU wins. The Texas fans and SEC fans have been getting at me when I tweeted what I said, like that call really mattered. Okay, I'm not guaranteeing an ASU win if that targeting call is made, but it's more than 50-50. Like it is more likely than not that ASU is able to get at least 20 yards. And again, I know the kicker had some problems, but if you get 20 yards, 35-yard field goal, that's not a coin flip. That's more likely than not that ASU wins that game. And Mark and everyone here watching at the Voice of College Football. I know it's a Big Ten show, but just we're talking about the playoff, of course, and we're talking about the Texas-Ohio State matchup. Just for a moment, like Steve Sarkisian went back to his Washington days for a little bit in that Arizona State game. It took Sark a long time to figure it all out in terms of how to be a really good head coach. Like he didn't put the pieces together at USC. Now, of course, his bout with alcoholism, which is a non-football thing, that obviously got in the way. But nevertheless, Sark needed a while to learn how to be a really good head coach. And like this took me back a decade. Like what was he doing in that fourth quarter, calling all the passes that he was calling with a 16-point lead, then an 8-point lead? Like if he calls running plays on first and second down, and also Texas was snapping the ball with like 10 to 12 on the play clock too. I mean, Sark wasted several minutes. That's not an embellishment. Like he wasted at least 3 game minutes with passes that went incomplete, not running the ball, not using all of the play clock. That was as horrible a coaching job from Sark as I've seen in a long time. Again, this took me back to Montlake. This took me back to the Washington days when 7-win Sark, 7-win Sark, was the epithet lobbed by USC fans and other Pac-12 fans. Like Sark he took a mental vacation in that fourth quarter. So Texas has just been doing enough to get by. And meanwhile, Ohio State is in, death machine mode. Like, this is like the 2017 Golden State Warriors. This is, to use a college football analogy, this is 1995 Nebraska. Like that Ohio State performance against Oregon, an unbeaten team, you could draw a very clean, neat historical parallel to the 1996 Fiesta Bowl, one of the great Steve Spurrier Florida teams of all time. Unbeaten regular season, just ran through the SEC like a knife through warm butter. Danny Werfel at the height of his powers. Nebraska hangs 62 on him, beats him by 38. It's just a total wipeout. Ohio State over Oregon like that, 34-0 before you can blink. The other football game I compare this to in the historical annals, Super Bowl 22. Remember the Washington Redskins hanging 35 on the Broncos in the second quarter in San Diego. This game also felt like that. So like a really, really good team with a great quarterback, and it was just turned into fine powder but with an overwhelming display. So, you look at Ohio State and Texas, these are not equals, at least not going in. Ohio State is Mike Tyson, and we'll find out if Texas can play the Buster Douglas role to perfection.
Yeah, just hearkening back to Broncos Redskins, the Redskins were down 10-0, and then just put on a blitz like we've never seen in Super Bowl history to the.
And just quickly, Florida was up 10-0 over Nebraska in that Fiesta Bowl too. Right. It's funny how it works that way.
That to deliver the, at the time, the most prolific passing effort in the history of the Super Bowl and touchdown passes, and have the all-time rushing performance at the same time shows you the type of offense that was displayed by the Redskins on that particular San Diego afternoon. All right, back to the here and now, because Matt and I can get stuck in the past, but blame me on that one. So Bam Ruff 62, just to clarify here, and we are sticklers for accuracy here at the Voice of College Football. With all the piling on, wasn't the SEC 20-10 in non-conference play in the regular season? No, sir, they were not. So if you're talking about all non-conference games, including FCS and Group of Five, these conferences win like 80-some% of their games. So you're wrong on both sets of statistics here. So if you're talking about all the games, I've run the numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but the SEC is like, 65-12 or something in all non-conference games. If you're just talking about against the other conferences in the regular season, no, the number was like 13-9. So it was not.
Maybe was he talking about power? Is he talking about Power 4? Is he talking about top 25? There might be a subset.
Either would apply, Matt, because I know that the SEC was something in the 13-9 range, non-conference, against the Power 4, the other power conferences. So, Bam Ruff, we appreciate you, but don't know where you pulled that stat from. But we that's one of my favorite tasks. As soon as the season's over, we run through all the metrics, all the numbers, compare the conferences, which has been a very anticlimactic endeavor in previous years because I knew the SEC was going to be number one, but it's going to be fascinating this year. But Ohio State and Penn State, boy, can you imagine if the Big Ten had an all Big Ten final for the national championship on ESPN, who has lost the Big Ten contract and is, the bastion of the SEC. That would just pain them to have to broadcast that game.
I mean, the storylines would be amazing, and the irony in all this is that Kirk Herbstreit is an Ohio State alumnus who really is not very well liked by a large segment of the Ohio State fan base. So, my goodness, like the media news cycle. Forget about the college football news cycle, but the sports media news cycle would be absolutely insane if that happens. And of course, the other really, really interesting possible storyline is Marcus Freeman against Ohio State. Because, after Ryan Day lost to Michigan, like there was a lot of Marcus Freeman to Ohio State chatter among the Ohio State fan base. Not saying it was ever a possibility, but just, like the name circulated, the conversation occurred among Ohio State fans. So that would be pretty special as well.
I did not see that coming. I did pick Ohio State to win the game, but I was expecting some epic classic as well. Although history has told us, as Matt has pointed out, and if you've watched enough sports, not just football, not just college football, sports, that sometimes when we're all lined up with this, this is going to be an epic matchup, this may be the two best teams, et cetera, one of them just hits right that day. And I know that Ohio State's not that much better than Oregon on a regular basis, but I do think that they certainly showed the ceiling of the two teams and that Ohio State finally came through on what I've been saying since like March, should be the best team in the country. If they play a B game against Texas, they should walk away the winner.
It would take an A+ game from Texas to stop Ohio State's B+ game. Absolutely. While we're talking about Ohio State, Oregon, here's something that we need to discuss at the Voice of College Football. And for everyone in the audience, obviously when you think about a tournament, a playoff tournament, whether it's the NCAA tournament, NBA playoffs, whatever, the first natural place you go to, of course, is selection and inclusion. Who's in, who's out, who's on the bubble. That's naturally where everyone goes. And of course, that's like appropriately. All right. I'm not trying to suggest it's not the rational, logical response. And then, of course, we look at seeding, as well. Who's number one, who's number two, who's, top 4, 5 through 12. But really, the thing that gets overlooked when we get into, expanded tournaments in any sport, bracketing. Bracketing did not get nearly as much discussion as selection and seeding. And we talked about the buys and all that kind of thing. And that's certainly an issue, right? Boise State, being the number 3 seed and getting a bye. Like, I think that the automatic first round buys for conference champions, I think that's going to be eliminated, if not for next season, certainly by 2026 with the new television contract. And I think that the appropriate reward for a conference championship, which, and it should be rewarded, but I think the appropriate reward is a home game in the first round. That should be the reward. And of course, like you get to keep your parking and your concessions. It's a revenue generator for those schools, and you get a home game. like your community gets that economic boost. Like that should be the appropriate reward for a conference championship. But now, so all those issues are there, but bracketing got overlooked. And here's how you fix the college football playoff. Here's how you improve the college football playoff relative to bracketing. Because you can have debates in a committee room all day long. But in reality, the best thing to do, and just, hey, if anyone at ESPN is watching this show at the Voice of College Football, I'm handing you a TV event that's going to print money, and it's going to drive conversation. It's going to get so many clicks at ESPN.com, it's going to make your head spin. Here's the obvious solution. You have a half-hour made-for-TV special on the playoff selection show day. So you start just by having the selection of the teams, and then you reveal the seeds. And then after you reveal the seeds, then you have the coach and players of the number 1 seed. They get to pick the team 5 through 12 that they either want in their bracket or outside their bracket. Right? So Dan Lanning in Oregon would have said, we want Ohio State in the opposite half of the bracket. We want Clemson, or we want SMU in our half of the bracket. So for number 1 seed picks first, number 2 seed picks second, number 3 picks third, and then number 4 has the leftovers. So you'd have this amazing theater and drama, and you can drive so much debate, interaction, but it's fair, right? It's fair. And so, hey, Ohio State's the far better team than Oregon. We're not debating that. We're not litigating that. But in terms of bracketing, Oregon did not deserve to have Ohio State as its opponent in the quarterfinal. We can all agree on that. Like the whole damn point of being a number 1 seed, you're supposed to get the easiest bracket. That's a tournament in any language, in any part of the world, in any context. Getting a number 1 seed, the higher the seed you get, you're supposed to have an easier path. If you're a number 8 seed, you're supposed to have a more difficult path. And if you're number 4, number 5, it's supposed to be somewhere in between. So the fact that the number 1 seed got the worst bracket, and conversely, Penn State, a 6 seed, got the best bracket without question. And number 2 seed Georgia, Notre Dame, definitely a tougher opponent than SMU, than Indiana. So like Georgia's not excluded from this conversation. That's still kind of a representative example. But Penn State as the 6, getting that SMU Boise State path, while the number 1 seed gets the death draw, the death bracket. So we have to fix the bracketing part, and having the number 1 seed pick which teams it doesn't want to face. It's the perfect solution because you make your own way as the number 1 seed. You earned the first pick of how the bracket goes. And here's the final thing for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football. If you make the decision a team decision, if you leave it up to the teams, Dan Lanning and Oregon get to choose which team they want to face among the 5 through 12 seeds in a quarterfinal. What do you achieve among many other things? You remove conspiracy theories connected to ESPN. You remove that. It's not a talking point. You get rid of that black cloud. So that is the obvious solution to fix the horrid, atrocious bracketing that has marred this college football playoff. I mean, it's been interesting, and we're all enjoying the football, but really, Oregon getting Ohio State, Georgia getting Notre Dame, while Penn State gets SMU and Boise State. And this is not to reduce Penn State's achievement. Like James Franklin had his guys ready to play, got 2 playoff wins in the semifinals. They earned it. They deserved it. But in terms of bracketing, we can all agree this is a travesty. And so there are the obvious solutions. And again, anyone at ESPN watching our show here at the Voice of College Football, I'm just printing money for you. So you just need to take this ball and run with it.
Wow, Matt, this is beautiful. I don't know where you come up with these ideas, but this is a doozy. So just to get this straight again. Oregon is the number 1 seed. They only get to select the first or one team, and then it goes to the number 2 seed to select one team, and it keeps going
Yes.
through.
I think that's probably how you would do it. You select the one team you want to play, wow. And then the other four teams select their one team, and then there would be 4 more teams left. Number 1, it cycles back to the number 1 seed. You pick the second team. So basically, if you're Oregon, you would choose the quarterfinal, the 2 potential quarterfinal opponents you'd play. You get the first pick before anyone else. Yes.
So let's just conjecture that Oregon would have said, we'll play SMU. And then Georgia
SMU.
would have said,
SMU would be the Oregon's first pick. Yes.
And let's say Georgia would have said, then we'll play Boise State. And then your 3 seed would have been, well, in this instance, if it would have truly been a 1 through 4, maybe it would have been Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, let's say. And Notre Dame says, we'll play Clemson. And then Penn State says, we'll play Tennessee. Interesting.
Notre Dame probably would have picked Indiana, to be quite honest.
Or I forgot Indiana. Yeah. I forgot about the Hoosiers. Wow. And what else is fascinating about that, of course, and you've already thought about this because you've masterminded this, is that puts a lot of interesting pressure and a lot of, the coach has to pick someone. So, but
yeah, it's literally like, they picked us. Yes.
Yes. Who they don't believe is that good. That's that that would never fly. That those coaches would not want any part of trying to.
Players would. But the other thing is, Mark, this is a TV-driven property. Like, if anyone at ESPN gets wind of this, like, come on, like, and this is the other piece of this. Like, we love the NCAA tournament selection show. CBS does it right. It's like unwrapping a present on Christmas morning. Like, people are happy, almost giddy to like selection show, selection Sunday, bracket. ESPN has done an absolutely awful job with the playoff selection show. Like, the people aren't looking forward to it. It's more like people are ready to vent their anger at how bad and awful and unfair this is. So if you're ESPN, if you're in Bristol, you want to turn this into a happy moment, Christmas morning. And this is the concept that would do that. Like, oh, I can't wait to see what teams Dan Lanning's going to pick. Like, we're all ready for that. So, it works on just every possible level.
That is beautiful. That is tremendous. Yes. Because who better to know who should be in that position as the lowest seeded teams in the bracket? That's
absolutely
good stuff. That is really good stuff. And again, at this point, it's ancient history, this Rose Bowl finale. But my situation, Matt, was after taking in Texas, Arizona State, I was producing an instant analysis video. And by the time, you look at the stats and
yeah.
and then I never miss football. So I'm not going to miss any of the Rose Bowl. Like, I'm not going to start watching in the middle of the second. I'm going to watch from the first play. I'm just behind. And so the unfortunate part of that was, I take like 20 minutes to rip off the audio, and then I'm, doing screenshots and stats and that sort of thing. And I'm doing my best to be able to pull stats and not see the ticker at the top of but it was just impossible for me. So I see 7-zip and I'm like, oh, wow, Ohio State scored fast. And then I see 17 and then I see 31 and I'm like, what is going on?
It was the Price is Right cliffhanger game.
Yes.
The mountain climber yodeling. That's what it was.
And then for anybody out there, and it's probably all of us who have watched a game after the fact. Now, that's the last I saw was 31-0, and then I started watching the game from the first play. And then you're trying to guess, okay, what's going to happen here? Because I know that they're going to get to this score at this point. So what's going to happen next? But my goodness, that was just a butt kicking of epic proportions.
And let's actually just deal with that particular topic of the transition from the Peach Bowl to the Rose Bowl. What if, Mark, what if Texas ASU went 6 or 7 overtimes? That's an absolute train wreck. And I have to think that the overtime format in college football is probably going to be truncated so that you don't have endless overtime, because that is a TV disaster. It's kind of, you and I both are fans of Grand Slam tennis. Like when a tennis match goes 4.5, 5 hours, Isner Mahou or any other, really long extended fifth set. I mean, that's a nightmare for television. The television networks, they want to have that dependable, solid TV window, that block that they can sell to advertisers. When it's running 2 hours over, and if Texas ASU goes 7 overtimes, you're running way into the Rose Bowl time slot. Like ESPN and the playoff really averted a total disaster. Now, of course, Ohio State and Oregon basically being over in the second quarter was kind of its own disaster. But you get the point that if Texas ASU had gone on an hour longer, and it could have, that's just a TV train wreck. So I have to think that overtime adjustments are going to be ahead for college football in 2025.
Whoa, Nelly college football game. Thank you for filling in the blanks there. As I estimated, 64-16 is the SEC's record in all non-conference games. But of course, they got a number of gimmies against the FCS in the low group of fives. That reminds me, going in the Wayback Machine, and Troy's going to make fun of me because he just said that we should have some kind of Jerry Seinfeld effect when we go to the past. But I'm going to bring this up anyway, because the programming nightmare that you just brought up reminds me of one of the worst I saw at ESPN. Was the U.S. Open final, speaking of Grand Slams, was moved from Sunday to Monday night because of weather. So Well, it was supposed to be like a Monday, like 4 p.m. Monday Night Football was that night. And so there was lightning in the New York area. Well, unfortunately, nobody thought, well, the U.S. Open's in New York. Where do you think the Monday night opener was played? It was like a Ravens-Jets game in New York. So not only was the nightmare that one of these events was being delayed, and normally it would be, okay, well, the Monday night games, Kansas City and Pittsburgh, and there's no weather, and so they start the game. Now, what are you going to do? Well, you got to move the U.S. Open to ESPN2 or something. No, you had 2 events at the same time being delayed, and so you had no events, but eventually both of them are going to start. It was just a crazy night.
Insane.
Absolutely. Penn State and Notre Dame. Here's another helmet game, and these two teams, aside from Riley Leonard, running quarterback, Drew Aller, prototypical NFL quarterback, other than that, my goodness, they seem to be mirror images of each other. Not necessarily outstanding, prolific wide receiver play, great front sevens on defense, secondary. The defenses are rock solid, great pass rushers, strong running games with 2 of the best tandems in college football in both rooms, with Singleton and Allen, and then Price and Love. Your thoughts about Notre Dame and Penn State?
It's been hard for me to pick sides in this playoff, but totals have been, I think, the better angle if you're looking at just from a betting standpoint. Like I didn't have a clue who was going to win Ohio State, Oregon, but I certainly liked over 55.5, and that hit. I had no clue who was going to win Notre Dame, Georgia, but I was solidly with the under, and that hit. And I think my view of this game, I have no clue who's going to win, but this is an under game. And, we have to keep in mind, Notre Dame's offense scored 9 points in the Sugar Bowl. You could get very technical and say it's 16, but really, when you're starting to drive at the opponent's 13-yard line, that essentially that's a defensive touchdown. Maybe just not in the most narrow technical official sense, but essentially that's a defensive touchdown. So Notre Dame's offense self-generated 9 points, did not score a touchdown if it had to travel more than 13 yards. down the field. And then Penn State, that was a very inconsistent performance against Boise State. And, it was a lot like the first 3.5 quarters of the Peach Bowl. But the difference was that Arizona State was able to make a final finishing kick, and Texas, Sark, as we said, lost his mind for a while there. Whereas, Penn State was able to continue to make defensive plays in its own red zone against Boise State. But really, the first 3 quarters, Boise State had plenty of chances. Boise State had plenty of looks. And so, to me, Drew Allar, there's a reason he's coming back for 2025 at Penn State. It's not all there. And keep in mind, like, Tyler Warren is an absolute stud. Like, he's the Brock Bowers of this year's NFL draft class. He's going to have a great career. He's going to make a pile of money. First round pick for sure. Drew Allar is not putting it quite all together, and that's with Tyler Warren to throw to. So, to me, the way Notre Dame is playing on defense, and by the way, Notre Dame was not great on defense against USC. I obviously followed that game for Trojans Wire. Having 3 weeks off, getting guys healthy, like, you can just see the difference. Better health, chance to regroup. Notre Dame's defense has been lights out in the playoffs. So, I don't see Drew Allar being the guy to crack the code. And I don't see Andy Kotelnicki outflanking Al Golden in an X and O chess match. And then on the other side, Riley Leonard is a better runner than thrower. He threw for under 100 yards in the Sugar Bowl. And I think if you're Marcus Freeman, it's interesting. And I mentioned this when looking at the Sugar Bowl a couple weeks ago here at the Voice of College Football. 1981 Sugar Bowl, Notre Dame, Georgia, was a game in which fewer mistakes wins. And this Sugar Bowl, 44 years later, fewer mistakes wins. It was just about minimizing the big mistakes. Notre Dame did that. Georgia did not. Notre Dame's formula is really, it's from the 1970s. It's from the early 1980s. It's not Parsegian. It's not Dan Devine, but the formula is still there. Just don't make the big mistake. I mean, that's what Notre Dame is doing really well. And so, like, if you're Notre Dame, Penn State's not the kind of opponent where you're going to say, "Oh, we need to think about this differently." No, it's exactly the same kind of opponent. It's that if we make fewer mistakes, if we let Drew Allar throw the big interception, if we win the turnover battle, flip field position, that's our game. That's our game to win. So it really is a mistake avoidance game, and I think that Mike Denbrock, he didn't use Riley Leonard as a runner in the first quarter. It really took him only in the middle of the second quarter did he begin to use the quarterback draw, some design quarterback counters as well. So that Denbrock's going to try and use Riley Leonard as a runner as much as he can, and Notre Dame's going to try and rely on a safe ball control formula, let our defense win the game. Like, I don't think you're going to see many surprises here. And so, to me, the under is the safest way to predict this game as opposed to which side's going to win. Like, this has 1916 all over it. It just feels like that kind of a game. And I'd be surprised if the winning team has anything north of, let's say, 27 for sure, but probably even 24. I don't think the winner gets over 24 in this game.
I don't think the winner gets over 350 yards of total offense. I'll frame it in that category in terms of yardage. Folks, I love the history, and we produced a video that was released today matching up Texas, Ohio State, 2 enormous blue bloods. We looked at the all-time, all the numbers, all-time. We looked at all the numbers post-1970, 21st century, and then we went college football playoff era. And I always enjoy those breakdowns. I'm going to do the same with Penn State and Notre Dame, looking at the all-time, the matchups between the two, which D-Rock Irish just let us know, 9-9-1 between Penn State and Notre Dame all-time. And then we will also look at the all-time numbers. And then, Matt, I can never please everyone. I do a breakdown. So I can go to Winsipedia, and it's a very easy video to do just the all-time numbers. but I'm trying to give different perspectives. So I manually go through to do post 1970. There's nothing magical, everyone, about 1970, unless you want to go the segregation route. I could make that claim and have in the past. But anyway, 1970, just as a barometer, just to give it a look. 21st century, just again, it's a nice even demarcation. And then the college football playoff era. And then I always have somebody complaining, oh, you picked those years. Like I'm trying to fudge the system or trying to prove some point by choosing a particular year. No, I'm just arbitrarily picking 3 time frames to compare the histories of the 2 football programs. That's all it is, folks. But it's fun. I enjoy it.
We have Notre Dame in a bowl game here. So, 1970 is historically significant because that was, I believe, the first Notre Dame bowl game since the 1925 Rose Bowl against Stanford, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
1970 Cotton Bowl against Texas, and that's Joe Theismann up against the number 1 Longhorns. And one of the seminal moments in college football history.
I have no idea why somebody actually brought up Dave Kingman in the chat. That's funny. I was just watching a Dave Kingman number series of at-bats just the other day on YouTube. All right. Good stuff. Anything else from bowl season? It's been discarded as being meaningless and so forth, but the number of, the South Carolina, Illinois game, that was a tremendous theater with Brett Bielema and Shane Beamer going at it. That was tremendous. And the stadium, it felt like some kind of rivalry game. And just a number of matchups were rather, but trying to focus on the Big Ten. Anything in particular stand out to you? Of course, Michigan, Alabama as well.
Sharon Moore, I have my critiques of him. I mean, I think he makes a lot of really dumb decisions, in terms of scheme, in terms of tactics. But give him this: his players run through a brick wall for him every single time. Like there is something he has in terms of getting maximum effort. And some people will say, hey, it's sports, it's competition. Of course, players are going to have maximum effort every time. No. Like one of the parts of coaching is coaching effort. Like coaching effort is a skill as a coach. Like you have to know how. You have to have a method, a plan, a blueprint for getting your players to play hard with a baseline of consistency and energy constantly replicated. And Sharon Moore is one of the very best in the business at that. And so that overcomes his other tactical limitations. And I was just so impressed with Michigan getting after it the way it did against Alabama, with all the top players missing, Graham, Loveland, Mullings, the list goes on. Like Michigan was missing its 6 or 7 best players, and that did not affect the effort level at all. If anything, Michigan played even harder to win that game. And you contrast that with Alabama, and Kalen DeBoer should have attacked this bowl game like it was a job saver. I'm not saying that that his hot seat was on the line, but if you're Kalen DeBoer and also there was a month of talk about, did Alabama deserve to be in the playoff? Man, I thought Kalen DeBoer was going to treat this bowl game with desperation and with urgency and give it his very best. And we didn't see that. And Sharon Moore just outcoached the heck out of him. And I know that, Ryan Grubb being fired by the Seahawks it just opens the pathway for DeBoer to get Grubb back. And maybe that's the thing that gets DeBoer back on track at Alabama. But Sharon Moore ate DeBoer's lunch in this bowl game. And Burt, was able to, outdo Shane Beamer and a South Carolina team that, won at Clemson. And Clemson was a playoff team. And South Carolina had some really impressive wins late in the season, beat Texas A&M, established itself as, a team that really very few wanted to play. Burt takes them down. So, man, the Big Ten, it wasn't just Ohio State and Penn State at the top, though, of course, those are rightly the biggest stories. But what Michigan did, what Illinois did, Big Ten really did clean up in the higher profile bowl games.
Bamrough 62 continues to post that the SEC is 20-10 non-conference games, but that's fine. You might be including bowl games. The SEC is 8-6 in bowl games. What's that? 12? That would be 12, and they wouldn't even be. They were not 12-4 in the regular season. I don't know where you're getting your numbers. They're not right. Anyway, do appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. On just a few days after Christmas, of course, USC wrapped up one of the stranger seasons across college football. Starts with a tremendous, entertaining game against LSU, of course, and a big win against the SEC. It culminates with another win against a decent SEC team, Mike Elko's Texas A&M team. Another entertaining game. USC could compete with just about anyone. They never got blown out. They took Notre Dame. It was a one-score game at one point with about 2 minutes left, and they had the ball in the red zone to tie the game. So they put some pressure on there. They, of course, took Penn State to overtime. When this USC team would get it together, they could play some really good football against some of the best teams in the country. On the other hand, they lose to Maryland, who otherwise went 0-8 in the Big Ten. And the other buffoonery out of this program. And now it's been an off season that is really not hitting right for USC right now. Just announced today, they lose the Branch brothers to Georgia. They are a portal duo of brothers that move on to Georgia. And then, of course, Jaden Mayava, all sorts of rumors of his leaving as he is in the transfer portal. Of course, Miller Moss going to Louisville. Just your thoughts, Matt, about the USC state of affairs since the end of the regular season.
Yeah, so Jaden Mayava to Miami, there's just a ton of rumors, and Tim Prangley and his team, they covered that extensively in a show over the past weekend. So if you missed that, you want to check that out with Tim. But the other big story, Emmanuel Pregnon, one of USC's best offensive linemen from the 2024 season, not just going into the portal, but it seemed to be that he was staying. And this has been a recurring thing at USC, where a player either commits from the outside or a player within the program says he's staying, like Bear Alexander from this past year. The player says he's staying, and then whoop, not long after reverses course. So USC's been hit by this dynamic, this boomerang, several times over the past 12 months. And so what's going on there, right? Why did Emmanuel Pregnon give indications that he was staying only to then reverse course? No one's forcing you to give this declaration at a specific point in time. If you're still mulling over your options, take the time to make the decision. But it's an extra twist of the knife for USC to get to think that, all right, we've retained this really good offensive lineman, and then he reverses course. So what's happening there? And you would like to think that a coaching staff and a football operations shop can huddle with their players and say, hey, if you want to play somewhere else, that's fine, but please don't put us through the ringer of believing that you're staying with us and then you change your mind. Can you please not do that? I mean, there has to be a way to have a conversation with an athlete. So I'm not criticizing Pregnon for transferring, but just this larger theater of saying that you're staying or giving indications that you are staying and then reversing it. Man, this is exhausting, and it really is brutal and miserable for everyone involved. USC has to find a way to not let that particular situation recur. If you want to go, but don't. You're not helping anything by making us think that we have a roster spot locked down at an important position, and then you change your mind and now we're scrambling. That in many ways is the bigger crisis than just the portal departures themselves. It's that you're thinking that your roster is actually going to be better because of a declaration that you're staying, and then you have to change. So like everyone at USC, who's responsible for it? I mean, it takes a village. One of the things that a lot of everyone has to be working together, but a lot of the discussion is centered around Dave Emmerich. He's like the football operations guy. He's not. So his title is not general manager. So people will say, "Oh, USC needs to hire a general manager," but many people close to the program think, "Well, Dave Emmerich is essentially doing what a general manager is supposed to do." But like there is confusion in terms of what actually the roles and responsibilities truly are. Maybe USC has to name a general manager with that specific title. Maybe that is what's needed to provide some clarity in the room. But however you slice it, whatever terminology you use, the people in football operations, they are not nailing things down tight. And that is why USC is in a very dire position right now.
Just announced a few hours ago, Sam Heward, son of Brock Heward, former NFL quarterback and current Fox analyst, has transferred from Utah to USC. But when you take it in totality, Matt, the departures far outweigh the incoming transfers, not just in quantity, but in quality. My goodness, I am not seeing much of anything coming to the program. And I'm not saying that these players aren't quality players that can contribute, but the losses, you mentioned Emmanuel Pregnon, a starting offensive lineman for the last 2 years. We're looking at the two branches, Zachariah on the offensive side, of course, just a tremendous talent, and Zion Branch on the defensive side. They received big NIL packages from Georgia. Rajon Davis, I know he didn't play great football at USC, but still a top talent. Deuce Robinson always impressed me as a tremendous player, and he should get more targets as he moves on, as well as Quentin Joyner, who was in line to be the starting running back. I didn't really understand that loss there. Of course, you touched upon Bear Alexander. And then, of course, we've got Kyron Hudson, who made some of the craziest catches in college football this year, although inconsistent. He's going to Penn State. So, of course, they see the value in Kyron Hudson. And Miller Moss, of course, the game one starter, going to Louisville. So just a lot of losses in comparison to the gains at USC.
Yeah, and in terms of Pregnon leaving, there's one other aspect to all of this, and that is that when Josh Henson left for Purdue, vacating the offensive line coach position, Lincoln Riley had a choice. Do I promote from within, and he did with Zach Hanson, or do I go somewhere else? Do I conduct a full job search interview process? So he acted quickly and promoted from within. So to me, Mark, the rationale was I need to retain Emmanuel Pregnon. I need to retain the offensive lineman that I had. Like, the guys in the room, the guys on the roster, like Zach Hanson. So I'm going to move quickly. I'm just going to promote him from tight end coach to offensive line coach. So Pregnon leaving is that much more of a puzzler, because you'd think that the Riley acting quickly with his offensive line coaching spot was precisely to make sure that Pregnon, also Elijah Page, stayed inside the program. So you have Pregnon leaving, and so ton of pressure on Zach Hanson as offensive line coach to land some really big fish, the kind of elite offensive lineman that used to be just part of normal business. In the late 70s under John Robinson, also under John McKay, USC doesn't regularly get those elite offensive linemen anymore. Zach Hanson, either on the trail or in the transfer portal, and we're probably looking at the spring at this point. He has to really land some big fish for USC to have a realistic chance of being good in 2025. Because with Pregnon leaving and Jonah Monheim off to the pros, it's a little thin in that room, and it certainly needs to be beefed up pretty quickly, and not just with bodies, but elite bodies.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We take your comments and questions here every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 Pacific, with Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. What is the word at Trojans Wire this week, Matt?
Well, I think we're all, on pins and needles. Is what's the next domino to fall, right? What's the next negative thing that's going to happen in the transfer portal or elsewhere with USC? I mean, it's just not a happy time. USC's not in a really good place. I mean, the best thing to happen to USC football this past week was Dan Lanning getting boat raced in the Rose Bowl. Like that's the happiest USC football fans have been in quite some time. Like that was a highlight for USC, just watching Oregon get run out of the building. And of course, the O stands for the number of national championships. Like that's been the USC fan base's talking point. But like if you're taking your joy, if the main good news is Oregon losing a playoff quarterfinal, yeah, that's an indication of just how dreary it is at USC. And the bowl win over A&M. I mean, it's a bowl win. Got to laugh at the SEC for a little bit, but so Jaden Maiava, very very spotty performance. Made some really bad mistakes in that game. And it's interesting. So Jalen Milroe is declaring for the NFL draft, but I don't think that story's over. I don't think we've seen like a full closure to that story, because when NFL scouts evaluate Milroe, they're going to see just how undeveloped he is in terms of processing plays, in terms of reading the game. I mean, I think that Milroe is trying to gauge where he's going to be picked, and I don't think he's sniffing the first round right now. I do not think Jalen Milroe is developed enough at this point to be a first round pick. And of course, we all know Jalen Hurts was a number 53 pick with the Eagles, and the Eagles, found the hidden gem. But like, I don't think Jalen Milroe is wanting to be a number 53 draft pick. So I don't think we've seen the end to this story. And so if Milroe reconsiders and then he goes into the transfer portal after NFL evaluators tell him, hey, kid, you're nowhere close to the first round, spring portal could be there for Lincoln Riley. And I think that's, especially if Jaden Maiava leaves and he goes to Miami, I think that's something that you want to keep in the back of your mind if you are a USC fan. And I mentioned Jalen Hurts. Lincoln Riley was able to work well with Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma in 2019. And that example is instructive because Hurts was a really developed runner, not so much a passer. Lincoln Riley didn't try to make Jalen Hurts into a pass-first quarterback at Oklahoma. He was really good at using Jalen Hurts as a runner, tapping into his running skills. If Lincoln Riley has a conversation with Jalen Milroe at some point in the future, if they or their camps are able to have some kind of meeting of the minds, that's going to be the selling point from Lincoln Riley and USC. So I don't think this story has run its course, and I'm certainly going to be following it with great interest and intrigue.
Fascinating. I am, of course, following every word Matt's spitting out, but I'm also following in the chat the vitriol between Ohio State and Michigan fans. Of course, it just never stops. One of these nights in the offseason, we'll bring on a Michigan commentator. We'll open up the phone lines in the chat because there's a number of talking points involving the history between these two schools that I think a lot of people need to have the record set straight on. And I'll even as an unbiased college football commentator, wink, wink, I will represent Ohio State just as a placeholder in that argument against Michigan all time. All right, good stuff. All right, man, we appreciate you being here doing this. We love talking Big Ten football with you each and every week. Those are that's your next X follow right there. That is the next one right there. At Matt Zemek, at Trojans Wire, easy to find. Matt is a tremendous follow on Twitter/X, as he is commentator here at the Voice of College Football. Matt, thanks so much for making this show roll for us, and we will catch you next week. Enjoy the football.
Yep, enjoy the semifinals, everybody, here at the Voice of College Football.